It was trying to say this.
Could the resemblance between the face at Cydonia and the Sphinx at Giza be more than a mere coincidence?
Did the Egyptians, in fact, as we know them, do this remarkable structure?
Recent archaeological and geological discoveries demonstrate that the Sphinx is at least 10,000 years old and maybe even older.
That is, the Sphinx appears to be much, much more heavily weathered than we have any right to expect from only, quote, 5,000 years of desert weathering. The kind of weathering we see on the Sphinx is best explained by the action of running water. You need rain to get that degree of erosion, 12 feet of it in some places. And that amount of rain has not fallen in Egypt for at least 10, maybe 15 or 20,000 years. Now that raises a wonderful problem. It means that we're now looking at a monumental work of art created at a time when nobody else on planet Earth is supposedly able to do anything of that magnitude or scale. There's no other contemporary civilization to pin it on. So who did it?
Could these both be ancient sculptures made by the same race of beings? If so, who or what is this face intended to represent? The key to understanding the face on Mars may lie in the fact that the Sphinx of Egypt is a combination of hominid and feline. Half man, half lion.
This should be interesting.
Hoagland's researchers, in comparing the two images, made an amazing discovery.
Half lion. Maybe there's a connection. Maybe the face at Cydonia is half man, half something else.
First, they copied the left half of the Cydonia head, made a mirror image of it, and pasted it onto the other side.
That's the simian half.
The results were interesting, but inconclusive.
Wouldn't it be wild if the picture...
However, when they tried the same thing with the right half, flipped it over, and matched it up on the left side, the result was a clear image of a lion's head.
Are these merely strange optical illusions, or are they the key to understanding the real truth behind our own past? Surely it's still possible that mere coincidence could be the culprit behind all of these so-called connections between monuments of Earth and the images we've seen from Mars. Or is there any more and better evidence?
In southwest England, the ancient man-made mountain of Silbury Hill has loomed over the horizon since time immemorial. Nearby is Avebury, believed to be a fortress centuries old, tall, earthen walls protecting an inner mound. The area also contains an amazing connection to the structures at Cydonia. The connection here was determined not by simple observation and supposition, but was founded in the solid facts of geometry. The question was, what if the ancient ruins in England corresponded in size, shape, and dimension to the features on the plain of Cydonia?
What if the Avebury circle was to represent the crater and Silbury was to represent the tholus, and the angles and positions of ancient features, including where the cliff would be and where the tetrahedral pyramid would be, and angles to other key things in this vicinity all seem to match, including the very size of Silbury Hill in terms of its exterior moat in reference to the tholus.
Were all of these structures built by the same race of beings, human or otherwise? And if so, does this constitute new evidence that intelligent life could have once thrived on the planet Mars?
Richard Hoagland suggests many possibilities.
One is that we had a previous high-tech civilization on Earth which developed spaceflight, went to Mars, built some stuff, and then collapsed. And we're now just rediscovering our heritage. The second hypothesis is that someone else from far out there, in the stars, thousands, hundreds of light years away, came to the solar system, came to Mars, built the stuff, and built a monument to this primitive being that would someday become a human being, the human species, here on Earth.
In either case, it would seem that some global catastrophe forced the Martian population to abandon their world and move to another, to the Earth.
And someday, we may discover, in fact, that we are the Martians after all.
Assuming for a moment that there once was a flourishing race on Mars and that they built this complex structure, one important question remains. Why?
Cydonia was probably constructed to communicate some very fundamental information. We believe now that we are looking at the outlines of a whole new physics, how the universe functions, a kind of a grand unified theory, as it were, given to us, communicated, even on the photographs taken by Viking, by the geometric layout of the structures.
Researchers now believe that the key to understanding the geometry of the D&M pyramid may be in the size, shape, and position of the massive structure. Hoagland and others point out that the pyramid is not oriented to the Martian North Pole, but is turned slightly to one side. Latitude lines show that two of the faces are out of alignment at exactly the same angle, 19.5 degrees.
Why 19.5? That on every major and minor planet that we have flown by, looked at, or mapped in the last 30 years through NASA imagery, the major disturbance, starting with Jupiter and the Great Red Spot, lies just about at 19.5 north or south.
The Great Red Spot on the planet Jupiter is essentially a giant cyclone, an atmospheric storm larger than the entire planet Earth. It continues to churn away for year after year, right at 19.5 degrees south. Hoagland asserts that on every planet in our solar system, there does seem to be some kind of major geological or atmospheric disturbance found at 19.5 degrees north or south, including our own gigantic volcano, Mauna Loa. Colossal power rages up from the center of the Earth, emerging in the Hawaiian Islands at 19.5 degrees north. Does this suggest that the builders of the D&M pyramid recorded in its structure a sort of key to the inner nature of every planet in our system, including our own? According to Hoagland, the builders of the monuments at Cydonia had a reason for leaving the number 19.5 encrypted in a pyramid.
This is a four-sided, four-cornered object termed a tetrahedron. Because if you put this structure in a sphere, it predicts some remarkable phenomena.
Hoagland says that if a perfect tetrahedron, or pyramid, is placed inside a sphere, such as a planet, so that one tip is at the north or south pole, the other tips will fall at the latitude of 19.5 degrees north or south, the same as the angles discovered in the D&M pyramid. Was this giant tetrahedron built on the plains of Cydonia to help future generations understand the sources of power within their own planets?
There are still so many questions left unanswered. Is this face just a natural formation, or was it constructed by some long-lost civilization? And what of the pyramids of Mars? Are they ancestors of the pyramids of Egypt, or just uniquely shaped piles of frozen Martian soil? Is the perfect geometric precision found in these surface features of Cydonia nothing more than a bizarre series of coincidences? Could it be that we are descendants of ancient Martians who sought refuge from their own dying world? If so, does that mean that we are the Martians we claimed we might someday meet? As scientists plan future manned missions to the Red Planet, are we on the verge of learning that Mars is not only our destination, but was also once the beginning? In the late 1980s, something truly amazing began to happen in the green fields of England. Reports came in of sightings such as this: silvery discs flying or hovering low over the open countryside, and apparently these objects were seen in great numbers.
The town of Warminster has gained the reputation as the UFO capital of England. The sheer number of sightings in that area has been nothing short of staggering. One particular phenomenon we've been watching with interest has been the sightings of a spherical object that seems to glow amber, orange, or gold. There have been quite a number of sightings of that kind.
And such UFO sightings were often only the beginning of the mystery.
According to eyewitness accounts, with the first rays of the next morning's sun came astonishing evidence of the previous night's encounter with the unknown. Someone or something left an area of the field flattened, pressed down into perfect geometric shapes.
The crops are not cut, they are not broken. They've been carefully and systematically swirled flat to the ground.
And over the years, these patterns have revealed themselves to be perfect circles, or ovals, or circles with rings, and sometimes circles, rings, and satellites.
If there is a connection between the UFOs and the mysterious markings, the so-called crop circles may constitute the most positive evidence yet for the existence of alien visitors to our planet.
But are we sure that the crop circles and UFOs are related?
Remember in the fall of 1991 when these two gentlemen in southern England were trotted out on the world media as the explanation for the crop circle mystery? Two guys who claim they did it all.
According to them, they had boards which they pushed down across the grain, and they just kept walking around in circles or whatever until they'd made the shapes they wanted. All of a big practical joke.
And for some reason, the worldwide network media accepted that
and announced to the world that the crop circle mystery had been solved.
There simply is no way that just two men could have possibly constructed all of these patterns, appearing on occasions 15 per day, without getting caught at it. Plus, if hoaxers went out during the middle of the night just to make this, how on earth would they have possibly constructed a pattern like Barbary Castle during the shortest night of the British summer? It would have taken a team of hoaxers days, and it appeared simply overnight.
Crop circles, like UFOs, are a worldwide phenomenon. The U.S. and Canada, Australia, Japan, they're all over the place. I heard some reports about them in the Soviet Union as well, in the former Soviet Union. They're a worldwide phenomenon, and the idea that two old English barflies are flying all over the world creating these things is patently ridiculous.
Furthermore, many crop circle experts say the markings in the fields are perfect geometric figures, often accurate to within less than 1/4 of an inch.
And yet, is it not possible that all the crop markings really are hoaxes? Even if Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley didn't make all the crop circles, might not the real culprits be hundreds of hoaxers all over the world?
People that believe crop circles were made by human beings are overlooking some very important features of the crop circles. They are interwoven and intricately laid, not at all the way that they would be crushed to the ground if people stamped them.
Current evidence seems to suggest that crop markings are created by some kind of aerial phenomenon, possibly a flying craft of extraterrestrial origin. But do we know that for certain?
Much of what we've learned about the formation of crop circles has been based on eyewitness testimony.
A young woman told us about a globe-shaped UFO from which came a beam of light she described as being brighter than white. A beam of light which struck down across the dark sky into a field near the ancient mound of Silbury Hill. In that field was discovered the next morning a Celtic cross pattern of crop circles.
Usually that's considered to be extremely good evidence. But in the case of crop markings, the most striking proof may come from what is not seen.
Several people claim to have witnessed the formation of crop circles and state they did not see any silver discs or globes or tubes floating in the sky above them. In fact, all they saw was absolutely nothing that was causing this effect. There was no whirlwind or anything like that. And so it truly seemed that the stalks of grain were simply falling over of their own accord.
We have more than 70 reports worldwide of people who claim to have seen things form. People describe frequently a buzzing sound. They will see the plants oscillating, whiplashing, and suddenly the effect takes place. And in less than 15 seconds, like opening up the fan, the plants are swirled and are lying to the ground. Many people describe seeing glowing lights, beams of light entering the area. Some describe as the golden ball of light enters the area, a loud explosion, a loud retort, a bang, at the same time as this particular effect takes place.
The Centre for Crop Circle Studies kept a close watch on the English countryside throughout the summer of 1991. On June the 22nd, 1991, 3 of the observers spotted a glowing orange or golden ball hovering in the sky, then moving away at a fantastic speed. Unfortunately, there were no crop markings that appeared on that night, but other markings had appeared on other occasions within just 1 kilometer of that location.
Then, Colin Andrews and his surveillance team were more fortunate.
We set up a sophisticated surveillance operation in 1991 in which we deployed radar, low-light cameras, infrared, and we even stationed some dogs from a nearby farm in the field there. We secured the whole field with security, intruder infrared beams, and we're convinced that no human being, certainly, could enter that area without us knowing about it. But early that morning, we had fog formed, and without any effect on any of the equipment, no radar returns whatsoever, from the center of that fog as it melted away was indeed this intricate pattern.
Is that the purpose of the crop markings? For everyone to see them? Are they a message to humankind from some other form of life?
As the years have gone by, the crop markings have been changing. They've been becoming increasingly complex and increasingly pictographic. In fact, many people now refer to all crop markings as agriglyphs, which simply means crop writings.
If the agriglyphs are messages from some other life form, what do these messages say? And is there any way to decipher the code of the crop circles?
Many people believe that the meaning of the markings is related to the place where they are found. For example, in England, the vast majority of the markings have appeared in the area around Stonehenge, and also Silbury Hill, which is the oldest and the largest man-made mound in all of Europe. In fact, one of the most remarkable agriglyphs ever found appeared with its axis pointing directly towards Silbury Hill. Since we know that Stonehenge and Silbury Hill were the works of an ancient culture with a surprising knowledge of astronomy, we may wonder if whoever is making these symbols in the crops in this area didn't give them this knowledge thousands of years ago.
Could UFOs have been common visitors to southwest England throughout its history? If so, it might explain at least one curious coincidence. In the region of the June 1991 sightings of the golden balls in the sky, there are numerous hills that still carry the names they were given hundreds of years ago. Is it significant that one of those was long ago named Golden Ball Hill?
It is possible that someone has been trying to contact us for a long, long time, but that we haven't understood how to receive this message. I believe the crop markings are indeed messages, but not perhaps letters or words as we might think of them. I believe they are messages to the subconscious mind, a reminder of some deeply hidden part of ourselves that knows we are just one of many intelligent races in the universe.
These extraterrestrials have been manipulating life on this planet for eons.
If these are being formed by extraterrestrials, I guess we should at least be comforted in the fact that they have attempted at communication.
If these are communiques, what is the message? Are the governments of the world telling us all we need to know? Are we only now deciphering what may be a centuries-old warning?
As the crop circles increase in complexity, at some point, perhaps the creators will make themselves known.
One of the most remarkable stories in the UFO diaries began on the night before Halloween, 1938. The famous actor and director Orson Welles led his Mercury Theater of the Air in a radio drama in the form of a news broadcast, telling their listening audience that invaders from Mars were rapidly conquering the entire Earth. In spite of announcements telling everyone the show was dramatized, thousands believed it was a real event, and panic broke out across the country. Orson Welles and the members of the Mercury Theater seem to have proven that a story about invaders from another planet could be readily believed by thousands, even when there's not one scrap of truth behind it. For all practical purposes, they had invented the UFO hoax. But according to many UFO researchers, that hoax would by no means be the last.
Yeah, right. In the last 50 years, there have been hundreds of people who have come forward with various UFO claims. But it later turned out, upon investigation, that these people were in fact hoaxers. The hoaxes themselves can range from simply taking a a UFO picture to writing books claiming that the individual had flown to Venus on a UFO. In some cases, the individuals will present evidence which supposedly backs up their story, but again, upon investigation, the evidence proved not to be valid.
Because of hoaxers, UFO researchers have been forced to provide more evidence for their claims. So for all of us seeking the real truth behind the UFO phenomena, hoaxes and frauds are a continual nuisance, especially when they're accepted by a large number of people as being the real truth.
But how can hoaxes be detected? What methods do UFO researchers use to determine the credibility of a UFO report?
It's generally helpful to consider the motivations of a person presenting a UFO report.
Historian Curtis Peebles tells how the truth behind one UFO report was discovered.
In 1950, a man named Frank Scully wrote a book titled Behind the Flying Saucers. In it, he claimed that the U.S. government had recovered a crashed flying saucer near Aztec, New Mexico. Scully said he had been told the story of the crash by a millionaire oil man named Silas Newton.
Now look, I'm giving you the story of the century, and if you know what's good for you, you're going to take it and run with it.
That may be true, but I'm not going to write no story based on the evidence you told me. I have a reputation at stake.
Now look, what if I were to give you some incontrovertible, verifiable proof that what I'm telling you is true?
What kind of undeniable proof can you show me?
And now you take a look at these.
Newton described this disc as having remarkable qualities that no earthly material could match.
Scientists in the country test it. He says it's bona fide. If he says it is, you know it is.
All right, Silas, I'll test these. And if they're true, I'll write your story.
That's all I want.
In fact, it was ordinary aluminum, the same as used in pots and pans. It had taken one very resourceful newspaper man named J.P. Kahn to uncover the truth behind the story. They used the crash saucer story to defraud investors in their various oil exploration schemes.
Man's in here, we tell them we got out of space, man. And we sell them shares at $50 per. And we say, hell, these guys are going back and forth between worlds. They sure as hell can dig a well.
Subsequently led to their arrest and conviction on fraud charges.
The Aztec incident and J.P. Kahn's exposure of the hoax illustrate how much confusion a hoax can cause in the field of UFO research. But what kind of evidence can be believed?
After all, with many UFO sightings, there seems to be no real proof at all. Only one person's story of what they claim they saw. Is it in fact impossible to obtain real proof of visitors from outer space, even now that humankind has begun its own exploration of space? It would seem difficult to stage a false UFO sighting here. So would an astronaut's report of unidentified flying objects be considered undeniable evidence?
During the early days of manned spaceflight, UFO sightings by astronauts seem to have been fairly common. But now UFO researchers are divided on how many of these accounts can be considered reliable.
In some cases, the astronaut sightings were caused by simple mistakes by the astronauts themselves. One good example is the sighting which occurred on Gemini 4 by Jim McDivitt. He describes seeing a large cylindrical object with an arm sticking out of its side passing relatively close to the spacecraft. It wasn't until many years later that the object was identified as being Gemini 4's own booster rocket, which was in a similar orbit. It was a simple mistake, but it wasn't an alien spaceship.
If intelligent beings from another world are visiting us here on Earth, it seems reasonable to believe they are far superior to us in intelligence and technology.
With this logic, one might suspect that they would be able to study us, even interact with us, without ever leaving positive evidence of their presence here.
Does this mean, then, that we'll never be able to prove or disprove the existence of extraterrestrial beings on Earth?
It's a question of evidence. Are the abduction accounts alone sufficient to prove the event is occurring, or is something more tangible needed? Something like, say, the landing on the White House lawn.
I don't understand the motivation for making general statements like, if these things exist, where's the physical evidence? All elements of physical evidence that you could possibly want exist. We have pieces of material that allegedly came from a flying saucer in private hands. We have landing trace cases where the UFOs, the flying saucers, interact with the environment, and there are things that can be studied there. We have photographic cases where the computer enhancement techniques and whatnot have not been able to tell us a mechanism for hoaxing the photos. We have not found the strings holding the object up, for example. There are videotapes, there are movie footage. There are good eyewitness accounts from credible individuals. There are multiple witness cases. Every criticism offered by the debunkers, and I separate the debunkers from the skeptics, but every explanation offered by the debunkers as a reason for not believing in the UFO phenomenon is not a credible reason.
Because people have been seeing UFOs on every continent, in every culture, dating back hundreds or thousands of years, all over the world. Millions and millions of people, and these are eyewitnesses. If it was in a court of law, their testimony would be enough to send you away to jail. But because it's UFOs, it's weird, well, that can't be true. I think probably 90% of all UFO sightings are misidentifications of explainable phenomenon, but it's also true that 9 out of 10 UFO sightings aren't reported at all. We really have no idea how many people over the years have seen these things, but the numbers are staggering, and the reports are consistent.
The question of whether humans are alone in the universe has been debated for centuries. The answer may come sooner than we expect, and in ways we cannot anticipate.
But until then, the world still awaits for absolute proof of the truth or falsehood of UFOs. And we will continue to watch the skies and carefully record every bit of evidence.
You're being presented with unidentified flying saucer physical evidence from the 1967 Manitoba, Canada case of Stephen Michalak. This case is considered to be Canada's Roswell and will be reviewed on this channel in the next few days. According to Mr. Michalak's well-documented story, he got close enough to a landed unidentified flying object to touch its fuselage. He prepared his hands by putting on welder's gloves. Upon making contact with the craft, the welder's gloves he had put on that were rated to withstand 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit for under 8-second duration were melted instantly. He then peered inside the open hatch to see an interior full of blinking lights before the hatch suddenly closed and the craft turned. He was instantly hit with a wave of intense heat and air volume from an exhaust that set his shirt and undershirt ablaze before taking off and flying away. Please stay tuned on this channel to review this story.